Hi, everybody. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Module 2, and we're gonna go through some of the answers that are in that practice problems at the end of Module 2. Now, Module 2 is pretty short. It's about the macroeconomic world, right? It's just the basics of that. So it actually aligns with the lecture video that we just recently did in 1.1. So it's a pretty short video. We'll take care of these. Check your understandings. Number one just says, why do we talk about business cycles for the whole economy rather than ups and downs of a particular industry? And that's because one industry, right, might be doing well or not so well, might be good or bad, right? But we want to see the whole picture. We want, it'd be nice if I could spell, to see kind of the overall picture is a good way to maybe say that, because it's not really the whole, it's actually just more like the overall life and the overall conditions. Right? So that's why we look at a business cycle. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to look at the conditions within an industry. But when we talk about recessions and expansions and things, we're talking about the whole economy. Number two says, who gets hurt in a recession and how are they hurt? And there's a lot of people hurting actually right now. We're in a recession right now. So we know that, unemployed workers, right, are hurt because they have lower income, right? That's a pretty straightforward one. You can't buy as many goods and services. And we would say typically, right, we see poverty rates go up, poverty increase, and we'd see firms see less profit. And realistically, in market economies, right, firms are owned by people, like you and me. And so if firms are earning less money, then that actually still means, right, that overall the economy is not doing very well. So we want, right, more profit for firms. We want people to be lifted out of poverty, and we want more people to have jobs. So recessions are bad news. Let's take a look at those multiple choice questions, right? We're going to just draw a little box over here, and I'm going to go through each one by one. Again, these are not going to appear, you don't have to do these for the bonus credit, but it is useful maybe for the quizzes. Number one, during a recession, which is likely to increase, right? So in the video, I talked about this, and it's in the text. Typically, we'd say unemployment goes up, right? That's a given that during recessions, we don't have as many people employed because they're not producing as much, and that's directly tied to the amount of output we have. So unemployment rate A. Number two says the labor force is made up of everybody who is what? Employed. Well, it includes them, but it also includes the unemployed. So we have the answer there is D, active or unemployed or unemployed. B, old enough to work. That doesn't go the right direction here, and I'm just going to quickly go through why these other answers aren't correct. Just because you're old enough doesn't mean you're necessarily willing, and you have to be willing and able to work to be in the labor force. Actively seeking work, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the whole labor force, right? Because I'm in the labor force and I'm not actively seeking work. I'm employed. D, I already said it's the right answer. E says employed or capable of working. Again, it's not about necessarily just your ability, it's your willingness and your ability, right? You might have lots of people who retire and things like that, and they're capable, but they've chosen not to. So 2 is D. Number 3 is a sustained increase in aggregate output. The amount of goods and services we produce over several decades represents economic growth. It's different from an expansion, which is just kind of those temporary fluctuations in output. Sustained increases kind of is that idea of growth. So we'll say for that one, E. Number 4 says, which of the following is most likely the result of inflation? And if you remember, inflation is the overall increase in the level of prices. And so falling employment is not usually a result of inflation. They do sometimes track together, but it's not like one causes the other. A dollar will buy more than it did before. Notice the more. If it said less, that would be true. But in fact, a dollar buying more would be deflation, where your dollar is more valuable. C, people are discouraged from holding cash. That actually is true. When inflation is really high, it means your purchasing power of that dollar doesn't buy as much as it used to. So if you're holding on to cash, you're actually losing money because tomorrow things are going to be more expensive. So you better go out and spend that money today before it's not worth as much. So C is our correct answer. Let's look at D and E, price stability. Well, that's the opposite of inflation, right? Price stability would be it stays the same. Low aggregate output per capita, all that just means is the amount of stuff we're producing. And that's not necessarily like a cause and effect relationship with inflation. Now let's take a look at number 5. The other things equal assumption, or ceteris paribus, which is it's mentioned in the text. It means that economists can basically say, hold everything else constant. Everything else is held equal. We're not going to play with all the levers of the economy. When we build a model, we're usually just looking at one change at a time. And so the correct answer here would be to say we're going to focus on one change at a time, B. Okay. Now let's take a look at the free response questions. The first one just says define an expansion and growth and explain the differences, and there's an answer there if you check that out. Number 2 says define inflation and explain why an increase in the price of donuts does not indicate that inflation occurred. So that's a nice, easy question. In fact, I think I already told you what inflation is. Inflation is a overall increase in price levels. And notice that I abbreviated here, right? It's perfectly fine to use up arrow for increase. That's people in econ understand that. And PL is the universal symbol. That's what price levels means, right? So inflation is if overall the prices are going up. Now B says, why do the donut prices not necessarily tell you that inflation happened? Well, one good, right? A change in price, one good price change, and I'm going to use delta there for change, isn't the same as overall. So for example, like you might have a reason why the donuts went up in price, and it might just be that like one of the input costs went up, maybe flour or sugar increased in price, but that doesn't necessarily reflect that the whole economy experienced inflation. So hopefully this helps you with Module 2, and I'll see you next time.